came to the school about 2 years ago, I interviewed the teachers and students and staff to ask kind of where were we at in terms of what needed to happen first. And the responses that I got from everybody was that we needed to focus on climate and culture and really get the discipline under control, and so that we could then have a focus on teaching and learning.
You know, I think that the Curley had a bit of a reputation as a tough school. You know, lots of kids were failing, and there was a sense of, in any given day, there being, you know, lots of physical fights, kids being suspended, lots of detention.
There was an abundance of things going on. I had some real high drama young ladies in my class at the time, very vocal, very emotional, a lot of conflicts that popped up here and there.
You know, kids were roaming the halls, they were in the stairwells. It was not a nice feeling in the school.
And one of the things that was very challenging was that the Curley was one of 10 schools in the whole Boston public school system that was deemed to be a superintendent school, which meant that it hadn't made adequate yearly progress.
And you had a culture where there was an immediate focus on punishing the kids when they did something wrong, whether that be suspending the kids, giving detention to the kids, putting the kids out of their classroom.
Normally, it would be a cut and dry, you know, 3-day suspension, boom, you're out of here, you know, don't come back. But the issue doesn't get resolved.
You know, I've seen some kids get suspended, a lot of kids get suspended, and then they come back and they go right back to the same behavior that got them suspended.
You get suspended, nobody wants to come to school. It's just a vacation. Nobody takes it seriously.
Well, I think that the tools that the teachers were using to deal with all these difficult behaviors were the traditional ones. You know, so there was just lots of suspension, lots of detention, and I think that part of the reason that people were open to something different was because they saw that it really wasn't effective. So there was a lot of pressure on people to make a change.
So one of the things that we adopted here at the Curley was a restorative approach to dealing with issues that came up. The idea being that when some kind of harm was done or when a challenge arose, that we would pull together all of the people involved and figure out how each was impacted and then how we could make it whole again. And one of the strategies that we used to deal with that was circle practices. We used a book called The Little Book of Restorative Practices. With the staff, everybody got a copy of it. We incorporated that into our professional development where everybody read it, we discussed it. The biggest challenges were changing the mindset of people. And you can't change the mindset of people until they see the positive impact that it has on them and their classrooms.
I would say that in the course of this process, there's like a third of the people that bought it right away, that are like, you know, totally into it. Then there's a middle third that is curious about it maybe and wondering, but a little bit more ambivalent. Maybe they don't feel comfortable with it for skill reasons or for philosophical reasons. Then there's a third that really look at it and feel like, thanks, but no thanks. This isn't for me for a lot of reasons.
Adina called me and asked if I would come out to the school and speak to anyone who might be interested. So there was a group of about 30 people there. And some people were very skeptical with their arms folded.
You know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not trained to, I don't know what's going on in these kids' heads. I don't know their issues, their problems. I'm just trying to teach a class.
Because I was like, oh, here we come again. Another extra thing for the teachers.
When we started, many people thought, especially teachers, oh, this is ridiculous, this is not going to work. If a student does something, there has to be consequences for everything. Students should get suspended if they do something wrong, if they break the code of discipline. And we know that we've been suspending students for a long time. We continue to suspend students and it doesn't work. So, but people were resistant to the incorporating these restorative practices. They just thought, this is just another fad that will pass.
most of these schools that we're in, the teachers are overwhelmed by many messages at them. They have more anxiety over giving up some authority. They have anxiety over somebody coming in and telling them what they're doing isn't right. And they're very overwhelmed. Usually once they try it out with young people, they're so impressed with how well it goes that they find it works.
Once I started talking to Adina and attending those meetings, I really understood the importance of doing the circles into my classroom.
So when it was introduced to me and when I saw the philosophy behind it, it just kind of clicked.
And so we don't have as many critics. Teachers are trying it now. Those teachers who didn't want to try it before now are trying it because they see that there are some positive things happening in the class beside them. Some of our critics are now saying, you know what, I tried this in my class and surprisingly, my class is flowing more smoothly, students are nicer to each other, so there's been a transition.
And then about halfway through the year, we kind of hit a turning point where in our 8th grade lunch, we ended up having a really big food fight. I walked into the cafeteria and there was macaroni and cheese everywhere. My first reaction was to take a mop and start cleaning up. Over the course of the afternoon, I had been hearing from teachers and students that, oh, Mr. Slater's going to cancel the 8th grade promotion ceremony and he's going to, not let them get their diplomas. And there was a whole lot of talk about punishing. It's like, what's the punishment going to be? When I was thinking, well, how did this impact everybody that was involved and what can we do? What was in place that allowed this to happen and what can we do to learn from the experience and move forward?
You can imagine after this food fight happened, I mean, there was just a lot of tumult among the staff. I think that there was a lot of, I would say, pressure on the principal at that time to figure out how to respond to it.
I had gathered a few staff members and we said, we've been focusing on these restorative practices, we've been talking about doing circles all year. I think it's important that we model what we're trying to encourage people to do. And so we took the food fight as an opportunity to model these practices, particularly using circles. So over the next few days, we gathered everybody who was involved in the food fight at lunch. There were students, there were teachers, there were cafeteria workers, there were custodians.
Students led circles to resolve to figure out how we want to deal with that food fight.
And then we had a set of questions that were developed about why it happened, how you were impacted, who was involved.
All it took in some situations was one kid taking the risk of saying, well, I do feel kind of bad about what happened. I think that we should figure out a way to say sorry to the lunch monitor. And one kid saying that, I think, made it more possible for maybe 5 other kids down the line to say something else and something else.
One thing a student said to me in a circle that someone had thrown some food on her, and prior to the circle, she wanted to get back at that student. But having sat in the circle, having the opportunity to hear what everyone had to say, she then could understand how she got hit. And she also said that she didn't feel the need to get back at the person who threw the food at her.
In a circle, each person has a voice, and so as the talking piece is passed around, only one person speaks at a time. So it was interesting to hear the stories from the custodians who had to put in extra time to clean up the mess, and to see the kids react to that in a one-on-one situation where they hadn't really given that much thought at the time. But now to hear how other people were impacted, it really had a strong effect on the kids. The kids then were asked to come up with a list of ways that they could repair the damage that they had done. And in the end, as it turned out, they obviously did all their apologies to each person who was involved in the fight. But then they also came up with a plan where they would rotate job responsibilities for staying after lunch to clean up the cafeteria.
So having that circle and giving students an opportunity to share information that they would not otherwise have shared helped to resolve that situation.
I think the real beauty of the story happened maybe a month later. I remember walking down the hall, and some of the teachers were saying, another food fight, another food fight. And so I felt so deflated. I said, oh my God, all right, you know. Turns out that what it really was the start of another food fight. So there was a kid or two that, like, you know, started to get in position to hurl, and other kids actually stopped them. So to me, that really told me that the lessons had run deep.
Oh, well, like when we first started, I thought it was a waste of time and it was boring, so I didn't participate.
At first, I really didn't care. I didn't want to say nothing because I thought they were going to make fun of people and stuff like that.
I think it was boring.
Because me and my friends, we would talk about it after and like say it was a waste of time.
I didn't think I was gonna like him at all. I was thinking, are you serious?
And then like when I started to do it more, I got more active into the circles. And I started to open myself up to the teachers and the students.
But once we got into like deep conversations, I understood what circles were meant to be for.
Towards mid-year, people kind of got excited. They rushed to put the chairs in circles, and we got straight to it.
What do you think parents and teachers need to know that would help young people have less stress?
And not take so much attitude.
I like that we're all equal because in a circle we can all see each other equally, and there's no person that is better than anybody else. Bullies are bullies, and they bully because they don't think that the person is going to do anything back. And if they hear that the person has a voice, they're going to stop because they get scared.
I used to be immature during the beginning of the year, and with circles, like I was like, because I used to like not pick, but like just play around with students. And as the year went on, I know that they had a hard life, so I just like don't mess around anymore. Like I don't know what people have been through, so it has changed me.
You know, and we live in this society where if someone does something wrong, there's a consequence. And so students need to know if someone does something wrong, we're all human, we all do wrong things. So the first thing that we should not be looking at is what is the consequence, but what happened, who was harmed, how can we fix that? So they're getting that here in the school.
You know, we have to really think about what school's about. If school is about creating healthy, content, vibrant citizens in the United States, in Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, if that's what we're really looking for, I would say that it's important to build those relationships first and allow students to use all of their imagination and interest to guide them into what academic interests they might have.
On a daily basis, I have to deal with the youngsters on their level. And what I'm dealing with now is to understand the issues that they bring them into school, because very often we assume, but we don't really know.
They're talking, they're sharing. They're not having to hold information in that they might otherwise have held in.
When you discuss those issues on a regular basis, I think it helps those students to focus more and succeed in getting a good education.
You know, one of the challenges has been, teachers will say, well, how am I going to fit this in? How am I going to fit this in? Because I have academics to do, I have teaching to do. And my response is, you don't separate the two. And I could be wrong, you all might have ideas.
Teachers have been looking for ways to connect academics to using circles. And so we've been really trying to be creative with ways of incorporating circles into our daily classroom routines. So it's not just about when harm is done, it's about coming together as a classroom community.
I use circles a lot to try and segue into my lessons. What kind of music you like? Oh, and then hopefully relate it to something that I'll be teaching. Oh, you like this kind of music? Well, you know, they use this kind of rhythm that we can play here.
Some classrooms in the upper grades use them to kind of kick off the week, talk about how was your weekend, what's our plan this week, what are we going to be learning, and then they also use circles at the end of the week to kind of close out the learning for the week, check in with kids about what they learned, look for opportunities for misunderstanding, and to refocus their teaching where they need to.
I really think it's the restorative justice ideology that is filtering into the classroom that I think makes us sort of a restorative community.
Restorative practices sort of moves the classroom from being a teacher-centered place to a student-centered place. It requires that teachers sort of step out of that traditional, I'm the boss and you take what I say, to now more of a sharing environment. So I don't think there's a distinction between restorative practices and academics. They go hand in hand. You're always communicating, you're always listening to what's being said.
We're really trying to connect the academics to the restorative practices too and build that classroom community.
I think everything is helping people to communicate with each other. Communicate for excellence, communicate for success, communicate to resolve a math problem, communicate to resolve an interpersonal problem between students and students, or groups of students and groups of students, or teachers and students.
And I have one particular incident where this girl was, 6th grade girl, was really harassing, insulting this 6th grade boy, and I got really upset with her, and I did raise my voice. For a while, she was just not doing anything, and I didn't understand why she didn't care.
Basically what the teacher said to me was, I have a kid in my class who is just totally disrespectful and rude, and I can't connect with her at all. I'm really at my wit's end. I don't know what to do. Will you meet with her and I?
And we had a conference, Adina, myself, and the girl, and we talked about what each of us did wrong, not just her, but also what I did wrong. And when she came back, she would do her work, and she tried hard, and it was like starting over completely.
But I think that in that whole scenario, there was really a way, because the conference provided the safety and the protection, it provides the structure to let things unpack, because there's a sense that everybody is going to be heard.
I've been in circles where students have actually cried and talked about how hurt they are that people are talking about them or treating them poorly. And the bullies are sitting right there in the class with them. And so it gives everyone involved an opportunity to kind of get a real feel for what's really going on.
So if they get in a position where they can open up and talk, they're willing to talk. But the key is to get them in that right, setting, where they feel comfortable, where they feel that sense of support.
And so I think that we just need to do more and more of this. Students need to have the opportunity to share more and to be heard, and they need to know that what they have to say is important.
And I think that's a wonderful aspect of restoring practices, that kids expect that their problems will be identified and somebody will help them try to resolve it.
I think circles help because students, they express their feelings more.
I like circles because they let you say out what you feel. So like, I used to never make eye contact, but I do now. When I'm in circles, I like looking at people talking.
Circle helped me as I really didn't talk as much with people.
One of the main reasons I like circles, I like it because you can express yourself.
You actually get your point across most of the time.
I like circles because it makes me know about people that I really don't know about. It makes me connect to them.
Like everybody can talk and everybody else can listen because we're equal and we're all the same.
If we want our students to behave accordingly, if we want to see good behavior, we should be really concerned about establishing relationships with students. And that is not something that you can mandate, really. It's not something that you're going to find in a history book or an English book. I mean, it's common sense.
And I think everybody does build relationships, and I think restorative practices is about how to spend more time doing that.
One of the things that I'm always trying to do in working with schools is explain that discipline is really rooted in relationships. If you have built a good relationship with a young person, meaning it's a relationship based on respect and trust and a real regard for one another, discipline becomes something that's very easy to do, because for the most part, most kids want to be in good relationship with other people, and you're really drawing off of all of this store of connection and goodwill and a desire to really restore the relationship back to a good state. I mean, you have to have good relationships so that when things go wrong, people want to go back to a good relationship.
You know, the bottom line for me is that behavior is based on relationships. When students know each other's story, they tend to be more mindful of how they treat each other.
I'll tell you, some of the best feedback I get about the way the school is today is from people who come to visit the school and say, you know what, there's a different feel in the school, and you can sense it as you walk through the front door, and you can sense it as you're walking down the hallways.
I think when people come in, they feel a sense of calmness here. I think that what they've said is that it just feels different. There's not running around and students being loud in the corridors.
The hallways are clear, the kids are in their classes, the focus is on teaching and learning where it needs to be, and in order for us to be at that place, we had to get the climate and culture to a certain point, and so restorative practices really helped with that.
So when you're walking through the hallways, you see this in kindergarten, you can see this in 5th grade, you can see it in 8th grade. I really see it used in every area in school.
And this is not to say that we don't have any problems here, believe me, we do, and it's a work in progress. But we're definitely on the right road, we're on the right track, but we're not totally there yet.
In the 2 years that I've been there, I've just seen remarkable change. It feels like it's a very different place. But I think for this to work, there really needs to be somebody, an actual person whose role it is to be paying attention to this and to be helping with all the aspects of implementation.
If you have someone in the school who really can model it for people, can come in when a teacher says, I've had an incident, can you help me use this new approach, to come in and hold a circle so that teachers can see that it's not so mysterious and they might want to try it out for themselves, to be able to work with your assistant principal and your principal and saying, well, how can we respond restoratively when there is a disciplinary incident? You know, what resources do we need? How do we fit this into our day? There's really somebody on site that can help a school kind of make that transition.
It's been great to have Adina Davison here on a grant to help people keep focused. I think teachers are very used to having new initiatives put on them. And so yes, I would say it's a new initiative. Depending on how it is handled, it's with professional development, it's sort of a way for one to think about building relationships, as I said before, and not a specific practice.
Every school can take this on in their own way. And there is no cookie cutter approach here. Schools are communities, they're living communities, and they need to adapt this and bring this into the school in a way that fits their culture and you know, and a way that works for them.
I realize now that there are other schools that use those restorative practices and they face the same issues as we do. And so we're not the only ones, but at least there is a tool out there that we can use and make our school to be more successful.
I think it's important for all schools to at least try, you know, to look at it, to see how it fits into their program or to their environment. And I think it would be helpful to all schools in some form or fashion.
People have seen positive change. The school is noticeably calmer. There are far less discipline issues. our suspension rates have gone down.
But it all centers around our students talking more to each other and to staff and just sharing, a general sharing. It's difficult to be upset with someone when you know their story.